This is the Global Mom Show, episode 31. Hi, I'm Mary Grace Otis. I'm a wife, a mom of 3 boys, a former expat and development worker, and a freelance writer for nonprofits and businesses. I've lived in Germany and India, and I've traveled lots of places besides that. But today, I make my home in the U.S., where one of my goals is to stay connected with a global view of life. This is the show that connects you with moms around the world who want to live globally minded lives and teach their kids to do the same. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening today. Before we get started on our interview, I want to tell you about my featured resource this week. Today, I want to point you towards another blog called World Moms Network. It's a website with multiple contributors from all over the world, and it has a lot of articles about culture and parenting in other parts of the globe. You can find it at worldmomsnetwork.com. Now, we've been focusing some on multiculturalism, global identity, and race so far this season, and today we're going to continue that discussion. As I mentioned in episode 29 with Lucretia Berry, race and colorism are ideas that permeate life all over the world. And because of the history of oppression around the world, stereotypes, division, bias, and systemic and overt racism still exist in the U.S. and abroad. This week, I wanted to bring you an interview with a woman whose article I read a couple months ago on the Mashup Americans website. The article was titled How to Talk About Race with Your Mixed Race Kids, and it's by Sonia Smith-Kang. And the interview that I'm bringing you today is one that we actually did a couple months ago, but it is still very much relevant to all of these conversations that we're having about race and identity. So let's go ahead and get started with our interview today. My guest today is Sonia Smith-Kang. Sonia is the founder and creative executive of Mixed Up Clothing. She's also a writer and blogger and a contributor for Babel, Huffington Post, and Mashup Americans. Sonia and her designs have been showcased on NBC's Today Show, The Real, Latina Magazine, HuffPost Live, CBS Los Angeles, and popular magazines Celebrity Baby Scoop and Babykins Magazine, and at cultural events across Southern California. She is the co-founder of Mixed Heritage Day at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, and she lives in Los Angeles. She's married, has 4 children, and she also volunteers and is a board member with Multiracial Americans of Southern California. Sonia, welcome to the Global Mom Show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here today. Why don't you just get started by introducing us to yourself and your family?
Right. Well, you did a great job giving me the bio, so that's great. But yeah, that's what I do. I've known early on that I've kind of had to answer a lot of the questions like, what are you? Where do you come from? So I've talked a lot over the years about who I am. And I decided that I was going to be an activist for the multiracial community. And I've done that for many years. I started my career as a registered nurse, and I was always kind of drawn to more of the cultural sensitive kind of aspects of nursing. So it just kind of fell into what I do already. So I decided as a stress reliever that I was going to make clothes for my children after working in a pediatric intensive care unit for so long. But the clothes that I made for them, I went ahead and I would source fabric from all over the world so that each fabric and each item of clothing would have like a story. So I did that, and Mixed Up Clothing was born. And I found that I was able to teach through the clothing. And that's kind of something that I feel strongly about. I just want to learn about other cultures as well as others learn about, mine and my children, because that's kind of where the world's headed.
Tell us about your background, because we haven't heard that yet.
Yeah.
So about your multicultural background.
Sure.
And then about your kids.
Well, I'm mixed. My father is Black. My mom is Mexican. We are a military family. So I was born in Puerto Rico. And then we were stationed on Oahu. So I moved to Hawaii. And then when I'm here in California now. My husband is Korean. And so we have 4 children that are multiracial.
Tell me about what it was like growing up biracial, living in different places, I'm assuming, with different military bases, or did you grow up in Oahu the whole time? Or
No, right. So we grew up on the military base and then before coming to California. And I didn't notice it growing up, being multiracial. It just kind of seems like the military life, there's maybe a higher preponderance of multiracials in the military. So there were a lot of kids and I actually happened to be stationed we were stationed in Puerto Rico and then Hawaii. So it was almost as if we were able to take on the culture of not only being on the military, they call that being a third culture kid. And also being, part of the surrounding culture. So we fit in just quite nicely. And it wasn't until I came to California that it was actually my heritage was actually brought into question. So I didn't get that until I was, maybe a teen.
And those kind of questions that you got, tell us what some of the questions are. We talk about that in your article that you recently wrote for the Mashup Americans that I want to kind of delve into a little more.
Yeah, what's always, if you talk to anybody in the multiracial community, everybody could kind of commiserate with that first question being, what are you? And so just for instance, you're at school, I'm a teenager, and, the kids will say, what are you? And my answer is always the same. I say, I'm mixed, I'm Black and Mexican. And then the second question out is, well, what do you identify with more? What are, like that wasn't enough. What do you feel closer to? And so they're really probing questions that I don't think comes from, I don't know if any other backgrounds get that same kind of questioning that mixed folks do. Like if I don't know why the question doesn't stop there.
Yeah, like if you're Polish and Italian, someone might not ask you, are you more Polish or more Italian?
Right. What do you feel more? What do you feel more? Are you more?
Right.
It's really strange, and it's something that I've in our community that I know that others have felt as well.
And what have your kids faced growing up in America?
Well, they get more of the older ones now. So my kids range, I have a 24-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 8-year-old. Oh, excuse me, she just turned 11. So the little ones are now kind of coming into their own kind of questions. And so I feel like I've dealt with it for a long time. I don't know if they get more of I could see the kids, they have very strong Asian features, my two younger ones. And so I could see their little classmates kind of looking at them, looking at me, looking at them, and kind of trying to figure us out. And so I think that's kind of harder on me. And I try to kind of touch base with them and see if that bothers them at all. And they seem to kind of handle it in stride. And I'm really proud of them for that. They do get, the same. It's always the same. What are you question, though?
Now, I mean, I would just think that this is starting to change some in America, that those questions aren't as common because there's so many more people who are multicultural and multiracial.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think although on the flip side, because there are so many and the numbers are changing, I think folks are trying to wrap their brain around maybe
figure it out. Yeah,
are trying to kind of figure out the different. It's not just black and white. Literally and figuratively. It's just, there's so many different mixes, I guess, that I think folks are really naturally curious and maybe just are trying to figure things out. But I know with my older kids, they're like, Mom, stop. Like, you guys are the only one who talks about this. And I'm like, kids my age don't care. And I was like, oh, okay, well, good. That's good to hear. So, yeah. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there are some change coming, but I think for now, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah. How do you talk about racial identity in your home? When did you start talking about it and kind of explaining that your kids might be getting some of these questions and what they should do about it?
It's an ongoing conversation in my household. We're a very open family. Just let me get that out. We talk a lot about everything. So I draw a lot about, from television, and because I've been in this multiracial movement, if you will, for a long time, they've gotten it for such a long time that it's kind of natural for us to just ingrain in anything that we do and talk about. Whether, we're watching TV and, we kind of say, wow, I wish there was, more brown faces on television or anywhere really. We just or in books, for instance. But my conversation, the identity conversation is kind of part and parcel with the birds and the bees conversations, the, driving while brown conversations, the drug and alcohol conversations. It's up there. I don't mess around, and then they get it early on, and then it, to their age level, and it gets deeper as we go.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd love to go through some of the main questions in your article. We already touched on the "what are you" question. And in your article, you mentioned the Bill of Rights for people of mixed heritage. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and what it says?
Yeah, no, I'm going to just pull it up so I don't misquote Dr. Maria Root. She is one of the people that I follow, and I have it as a screensaver, so it's not going to be too hard to find. But she was one of the people, when I read her Bill of Rights for mixed heritage, I just thought it's very empowering. And each person of mixed heritage should really be reading this and have it posted. It just really gives you the right to be who you are and not have to justify, let me give you one of the lines. It says, I have the right not to justify my existence in this world. I have the right not to keep the races separate within me, not to justify my ethnic legitimacy, and not to have to identify differently than strangers expect me to identify. Now, these are really big, the vocab's very big. So I try to bring it up to my children. And again, it's very age appropriate. I talk differently to each one of them. But the main theme behind this is I have the right to identify however I'd like to identify. And if you're not okay with it, I don't have to change your mind. I don't have to argue with you. I don't have to, say, please understand what I'm saying. And I think that's very empowering. I think it's empowering for children, as adults who are still, trying to figure out who am I. So I really love her work.
Mm. Now, the next question you talk about is, what are you more of, which you mentioned. And I kind of can't believe that this is just a common question that people ask you, but why do you think people want you to choose?
Yeah, I think they want to understand. And so they don't know what it means to be able to be okay with being more than one. And so they're looking at you, and a lot of what we do is it's based on looks, isn't it? It's kind of, well, she doesn't look fill in the blank, whatever culture it is. For myself, being Mexican and Black, there's not a strong, I guess, African kind of background, African American background, or look to me. So I think folks are really trying to say, whatever that means to them, they're trying to understand for themselves, so they're asking me, well, do you feel more Black or do you feel more Mexican? And I'm like, well, first of all, what does Black mean? What does being Black mean? And so I think it speaks more to them than it does to who I am, because it's telling me that they have maybe some underlying stereotypes, perhaps, of what it means to be either culture. And so they're trying to grapple with that. And again, I say I feel both. It's as if saying, how do I cut off my mom or my father? Who do I identify with more? And I've never understood that question.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say to that? And what do you tell your kids to say?
Yeah, I tell them that they're 100%. I tell them that they don't have to break it down into percentages. They don't have to, say, well, I'm a quarter this, I'm, a fourth of this. You don't have to do any of that. You just say, so for instance, they're Korean, Black, and Mexican. And then they'll say, well, what do you feel more? And they say, I feel 100% of everything. I'm 100% my mother, 100% my father, and they're whole people. And so that's what we've talked to them about, and that they do. And I think that's what's important, just as a parent of a multiracial, is that we give them the tools to have the conversations that they are having, and to not assume that they're not, and to bring them up, the questions up, even before, they may be wondering how to tell you or what it is to say. So we have to give them the language even before they may have it, have interactions with others.
Mm-hmm. The next thing you mention in that article is about those boxes that you have to check on all the forms, like that your kids have to fill out, that you have to fill out for doctors, the health department, everyone. And my kids aren't old enough to fill out those forms yet, so I have to fill them out for them, and they really drive me nuts. So, because my husband is, he's part Japanese. His mother is a first generation Japanese, was born in California. And so I've even had people say, well, you can just put white. And I'm like, no, that doesn't really work for me, because that's like disregarding his whole heritage. I mean, his mother was in an internment camp when she was 7 years old in Arkansas. I mean, there is a history there. Now, my kids are not very aware of it, because we actually live in a really small community where most people know my husband and his parents, and they know me. And so there's not a lot of questions that my kids get. And when we've gone to other cities and I'm with some of my kids, they'll say, well, where does he come from? Or what's your story? Kind of, they're trying to feel me out. And I'm like, oh, like, I never thought about that. Like, cause I don't get asked it on a regular basis here, because we live in a small town and everybody knows our family, and it's not a big deal. But what do you tell your kids about filling in those boxes, and what kind of experiences have you had trying to decipher those forms and things? Yeah,
well, again, I think it's a slow process. Some of the forms that I remember filling out as a kid, mainly, so my memory that I've strongly started to see the difference would be my teen years. So that middle school kind of age is kind of where I started to feel, maybe up until that point, mom, dad were filling out forms. But after that, I kind of was able to fill out those forms like in school. And it would really drive me bananas, really, just kind of trying to figure out what I placed, because I didn't fall into the category. And they would always say, check 1. And that really bothered me. And so I remember at an early age filling in, like I would either put in other, and there'd be a line, and I would write in my Black and Mexican, or I would leave like this. I called myself, an early mover. I would just kind of put in, you should have more spaces, or I'm both, or something like that. I remember just kind of adding a little comment so that maybe the reader, whoever was receiving this, would kind of understand. And so now fast forward to today, and some of the forms have improved, and there's now a way that you could check more boxes. But what I tell my children is not to feel guilty. That was one of the things I felt growing up, because I always felt like, okay, I think I said Mexican 3 times already, so let me go ahead and put Black on this box. And, there was always this trying to balance out. And so I always try to thwart, the feelings that my kids are going to have. And so I kind of early on, I've said, hey, now don't feel guilty if it's, if you have to choose one, if you have to choose mommy or appa, or, this or that. And, we know who we are. We're just waiting for the forms to catch up.
Right. In terms of the census and other government forms, I know they're working on getting those updated for the next census, but the whole thing kind of confuses me, because I feel like in some ways it's good, and in another way it's like, let's just profile everyone and figure out exactly, where they are. I don't know. What do you think it's going to be better?
Well, let me just give some quick background. It wasn't until 2000 that we even had that opportunity. So prior to the year 2000, it was the same, right? It was, the check more, 1 box. And so up until 2000 on was the first time that they actually had, we were able to fill in and check more than one. So, I think that's really important to point out that it was only 2000 that, you know, happened. So, again, slow process. They're actually going to try and, you know, delineate the Latino race, a bit more. So my nonprofit organization that I work with, the Multiracial Americans here of Southern California, or MASC, we're working with trying to do some education around that, as well as try to be part of the process for the U.S. Census about the categories that they're going to place. So we're still working on that. I think it's early, you know, to kind of try and give some clues as to what it's going to be, because it may be changing. But I think suffice to say that we are in a better place with the census, in that we can now check off more than one box.
Right. So the last thing you talk about in the article is racist jokes. And what are some of the ways that hearing racist jokes can be different for children of mixed heritage?
Well, racist jokes are pretty overt, right? You go from, you know, small things that people say that, you know, they're called microaggressions that are on a daily basis that folks that are multiracial or that they may get. Like, wow, your hair is so curly. It's not what I expect of, you know, someone who's Black. And you're like, wow, did you just say that? You know, or wow, mixed kids are always so cute. And you're going, thank you. You know, so those kind of things are very, you know, you don't know. So they're microaggressions, right? And then there's the other jokes where they're in your face and they're, you know, so I've had, just from my experience, folks who have made, you know, demeaning jokes about, or derogatory jokes about being Black. And I'm like, hello, I'm right here. And that's rude and offensive. And they're like, well, you're not really, you know, you're not full Black. So that I talk about in the article, where I'm wholly offended though, you know, and so what I tell my children is, for one, that they could call out people on their jokes and say that they're offensive jokes. And even if the joke isn't in reference to who they are, we should be sticking up for others. If there's a racist joke about, you know, whether it's Asian or white or whoever it is, that kind of joking it's offensive and it's hurtful. So I really tell my kids to champion not only for being multiracial, but for any other culture, because we share this space with so many other people, that if people would just know that those kind of jokes have no place, then, you know, we could continue to move in a better direction.
Now, many of our listeners are not multi-ethnic, but they want to raise kids that are respectful and accepting and that are not racist. How do you recommend that parents teach their kids to avoid those microaggressions and not to say things that would be offensive? And what should you tell them not to say or not to ask? I mean, when is curiosity okay, even as a form of getting to know someone? Like, what's your background? Where are you from? Where are your parents? Tell me about yourself.
Right.
And when does it come across as a microaggression or as really intrusive? Or when is telling you, you know, your child is so adorable become a point of, you know, well, because she's mixed, And I want to get into also talking about standards of beauty, because in the past, being mixed had a really negative connotation of beauty. And now there seems to be people saying, oh, mixed children are so beautiful. And in a way, it's just commoditizing the children and turning them into, you know, trophies or something like that. Anyway, that's like two questions in one. But where do you start with what's appropriate?
Right. And I really applaud the work that you do, and I appreciate it. And so thank you for creating this platform and for providing a space. And I think that's what it is. What I want, I guess, white people or anybody who's not, you know, who has questions, really, I want them to feel safe to ask these kind of questions, because I think that's where it comes from. It's a lack of maybe understanding. So I think having programs like this is really important. So what I want is for a mom or parent, whoever it is, who just wants to learn about somebody else, who may not have the opportunities. I always suggest, it could be as in depth as you'd like, or, kind of try to skim the surface in the beginning, whether that's going to a museum. So now we have these great museums. There's one that just opened. So you have the Natural History Museum, the Smithsonian Institute of African American History. You have, some of the Latin American modern art museums. So you have an opportunity to get out of, your small little town or your insulated little area and explore. So I always say that it takes commitment. And it takes a real plan of action to get out and try and learn about somebody else. And so that's what I suggest to people, is to, even as simple as hopping on Amazon and grabbing a book that has, that features characters that do not look like your children. So for my children, I make sure that I not only have books, because, having books with white characters is very easy to find. It's the other books that are really difficult. That's why there's campaigns like We Need Diverse Books campaigns that encourage minority or other people of color to kind of start writing and having characters that look like what the world looks like. So I suggest to white families to grab a book that does not look like your child and have that in the library. And not only do I buy one book for my child, I buy one for their library to have in their classroom, because it's one thing to have my child know, but you want to give that information to others. So I put one in their classroom, and so that the other kids have an opportunity, if they don't get it at home, to see children that don't look like them. If you don't have necessarily a friend that is of somebody of a different culture, maybe that's something that you can try and have for your children. Maybe a play date, if they genuinely gravitate towards another child who does not look like them. Maybe encourage the relationship and go on a play date and become friends with the parents, and come from a place that is genuine. And if someone came to me with the genuine curiosity of wanting to learn about me, I'm good. I want to hear it. I want to talk it through. I want, again, create this space that is safe for them to ask these kind of questions that maybe they've had and that they've, struggled with, that they wish they could just have that person that they could talk to. And then, we kind of, it's that each one teach one mentality that I take on. And it's kind of, if I teach you, maybe you'll go out and you'll share with your friends that don't look like me. Like, hey, we shouldn't be saying stuff like that. So we're almost creating this, where not ambassadors, maybe an ambassador for the multicultural community, where, they get out and they're going to disseminate the information that they've learned. So that's how I kind of approach when folks want to learn. There's so many ways. There's maybe watching some great videos. Breaking the Code is a great one, where it kind of talks about maybe the thoughts that you might have about a different culture. So I hope some of those have helped answer that first part.
Yeah, I think one point you're making is that you don't have to pick a multi-ethnic person and ask them all your questions. You need to do some research first. I mean, there's the internet, there's books, there's museums. Like, try to understand some history before you just start firing off a bunch of questions at somebody. Get educated, and then you can start asking genuine questions that you would ask any other friend that you have about who they are, because you want to know them as a person, not as a thing or a special token that you now have a multicultural friend.
You got it. Isn't that funny?
Okay.
But I do want to say that one of the things that I've heard in some of the classes and courses that I've taught is there's this sense that being colorblind is the thing. And I hear
Mm-hmm.
it time and time again, where it's like, in our household, we don't see color. And I use that voice because it boggles my mind, because seeing somebody for what they are is not a bad thing. So I want to encourage folks to, to take that out of their language.
Mm-hmm.
Because to say you're colorblind is not okay anymore. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what folks want you to do, and they want you to see them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's what you do while you're seeing them. That's the issue. So for myself, I want you to see who I am and all that makes me who I am, and to appreciate it, and to just understand is, part of learning about somebody else. And it would help decrease some of the stereotypes that we have for others.
Mm-hmm.
So feel free, see color, see people, and take that out of your language.
Yeah, I think that was really popular when I was growing up in the
Yes.
70s and 80s and early 90s, that it was just like, oh, we're just going to ignore the race problem because it's over and we don't need to recognize people's history. And that really like whitewashes everybody and makes it like they don't have a story and they can't share their story. So I appreciate you sharing that. And now I want to get back to this whole standards of beauty thing, because I think it's really interesting that this whole idea of treating kids as a commodity or as little trophies, and somehow that mixed children are more beautiful than non-mixed children or whatever, and that's just really not an appropriate thing to say. It comes across in a way that's like fetishizing somebody's features
Right.
more than others.
Right.
And usually it's because it's degrading another race's features. Like, well, this person would be prettier if they were less black.
Correct.
Is a lot of times what it amounts to. And that's really awful.
Yeah, it's dangerous. The word I was, when you were, talking about it, and that immediately popped up, is fetishizing. And so I'm glad you said it. So what happens when, and again, comes from a well-meaning, I know the person thinks that they are giving a compliment when they say such things. So just for instance, my children, they're like, wow, yeah, mixed kids are so cute. And so you're right. What it's saying is that if they were not, multiracial, or if they were not, fill in the blank, that they would be less attractive. And so, if someone were to say to me, what I hear is, if I was full black or whatever it is, if I was just black or just Mexican, I would not be the same. You would not be saying that to me. So it is pretty dangerous, because what it's saying is that others are not attractive. And I think that that's really, really hard. And it's harder for the person who's receiving what you have tried to say was a compliment, because we're left with trying to still understand what you meant.
Well, even in a family, if one child has more characteristics that are of a certain race and one child has one that are more of a certain, possibly less desirable by the world's beauty standards characteristics, how does that make them feel?
Yeah, no, it's, so my youngest son is dark. He's darker than my three others. And one of the things that I hear, and so in the Asian culture, being white is the ideal form of beauty. And so as you get darker, and that in and of itself is a conversation, right? Colorism is a conversation.
Right.
And it's a whole thing that we could have talked about. But just suffice to say, colorism is huge, not only in Asian cultures, don't get me wrong, in Black culture, in any of the cultures. So the standard of beauty is white. Here in America, the standard of beauty is white. And so my son, being as dark as he is, he gets that all the time. And one day he said, "What's so wrong with my color?" And I mean, I could literally start crying at any time that I hear his little sweet voice asking, why am I, why? I said, honey, grandpa's black. That's just how, genes work. And, your color is beautiful. But again, it's saying to him that whatever he is not beautiful, or that's what he's hearing. So I think saying comments like that, I really want folks to understand that you can leave something with the child that goes longer than your question or your compliment ever did. And I think if we start to, and I'm not saying don't say anything, I'm saying be careful. Words, like we say with everything, are power and powerful. And so your compliment or backhanded compliment, as it were, could really do something to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. So just leave it at, wow, you're beautiful. You're adorable. You're so cute. Just leave it at that and don't try to decipher the whole thing.
Oh goodness. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. I really, as a parent, one of the things that I'm thankful for is that for my mixed children, I lived it. Right? Mm-hmm. So I would love your take on what it means to be a monoracial, parent raising multiracial children. Because my husband, who is Korean, we can almost just kind of give them what we are. So I feel like for myself, I'm like, guys, I am you. I know I was there. I hear it. I see it. And so my husband is left to say, tell me what it means and help me help you, this whole thing. Because there's a difference. So I share with them a lot of my experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've thought about more and more recently, and just even with the way that my children look. I mean, my youngest child has blonde curls and blue eyes, and he's fairer than I am. Mm-hmm. And we don't know where this came from, except for the white great-grandparents on both sides, because my husband is half Japanese. Sure. So he looks very, very different. And I feel like it's really interesting, because I had this discussion with them a few weeks ago, well, Omi, that's what we call our grandmother. It's a German word, because my husband also grew up in Germany, and I lived in Germany. We speak German some. And so I said, Omi is Japanese. They're like, no, she's white. You're white. Mm-hmm. We have white skin. I mean, they have an understanding of what skin color is, but we live in a very homogenous society up here, where there's not a lot of mixed races and there's not separate cultures. I don't know what my kids, how they will identify. Right now, I was talking to someone about this a couple of weeks ago. I said, my kids are identifying as white. And she said, well, why is that a problem? And I'm like, it's a problem because in America, identifying as white it seems to be that identifying as a different race is less desirable. And that's what bothers me about it, because they should be able to identify as Asian as they want to be. And that should not affect any of their life in terms of discrimination. Right. And I would want that for them to be able to say, I am Japanese American. Right. I have this in my blood. This is what happened to my family. This is where we are from. And this is our history. And not have to pass as something else. And so that's a little bit from my perspective. And I guess part of me is asking the question, how much do we talk about this in our family?
Just to, if I heard a couple of things in what you were saying that, some things, and I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to jump right in and,
Yeah, please do.
I think that, sometimes, like my husband, going back to him, Korean American, the whole thing, he maybe takes a little bit for granted, his household growing up, that he was able to take on the Korean culture just kind of just by being in a house, right? Mm-hmm. Today, it has to be a little bit more thoughtful. We put our children in, Korean drum class, or they both have their hanboks, which is the Korean celebratory kind of fancy outfits that they wear on special occasion. We made sure that they, that we go to the different museums, or have different books, like I mentioned earlier, but it is celebrating their culture, which helps bring in that identity. I know right now that you're saying that they're in an insular kind of environment, but should they go outside of this, safe environment where they're going to be forced to
define themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to give it to them now so that they're not struggling or looking for the words, even if they may not use the language where you are. You want to be able to give them some of that to take with them so that they're not on the first day of college campus when it's, looking for different orgs that are, or student groups that are on campus going, wait a second, how come they're not accepting me in this group? Or, is it because I look like this? Or, I think we don't want them to feel sad or hurt or confused or any of those kind of words. We just want our children to be happy, and that's fine. But we have to do some of the legwork, and we have to, whether that's bringing in, some books when they're old enough about the internment, and, maybe having grandma or somebody or dad or anybody teach them just, hey guys, mom doesn't know as much about this either. Can we, hop on and look at a trusted resource and look at some stuff? Or what do you guys think about this? I do the same with my grandparents and talk about Mexico or talk about my dad's, the African diaspora, whatever it is. It has to be done, and it has to be regular. And, even if it's watching the news and, or talking about different television shows, bring up the conversation so that they hear it. And those are just some of the things that I heard just in what you were saying.
I appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of white mothers out there raising mixed kids or have adopted kids who don't know what to do. And even though I may sound awkward talking about it, I feel like it's really important to have these discussions because we have to be able as a country and to be able to talk about these things in an open way. Otherwise, we're never going to make progress. So I appreciate you listening to me kind of share my experience as well.
Right. So. No, I appreciate you sharing. I think one of the things that I wish I would have listened in on my kids taking Korean. They're in a Korean immersion program at school here in Los Angeles. And so when they were doing their studies, if I would have just listened early on, maybe I would have had a stronger vocabulary in Korean. But it's really taking the time to learn about them as well. And they really do teach me. And I think that's the message. There's so much beauty in the history of another culture. If we just take time to find out. One of the last things that I was going to say about that was I did an article, celebrating, when my grandfather passed away. There's something in the, Latino culture called Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead. And so in doing my research, I found that there's something similar in the Asian culture. And I brought that to my children and I just said, look, Mommy found that just in, we do it here in this culture, it's the same. If we just look at that, we could find similarities in what others are doing and share that experience. I think that's what it is to have a deep appreciation of somebody else other than what you look like in the mirror.
Well, Sonia, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Yes, thank you. It was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you and the platform that you give to your audience.
Thanks. Well, before we go, I want you to tell us real quickly about the Mixed Heritage Day that you helped start at Dodger Stadium.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that started. My again, the little guy. We were at. It was Filipino night at Dodger Stadium, and they were flashing on the jumbotron there the different cultural heritage nights that were coming up. It was Cuban night was coming, and Japan night was coming up. And my son said to me, "Mom, is there a day for mixed kids like me to come to the ballpark?" And I was like, what? Oh no. So I'm singing, I'm doing the whole thing, take me out to the ball game, which we do at Dodger Stadium. But it bothered me what he had asked me. And I knew at that point that I was going to get him a day, if you will. And so I reached out to the LA Dodgers and I gave them the numbers. that the multiracial community is the second fastest growing population. And here in Los Angeles, we're very diverse. And I gave them all the numbers and they were like, sold. What day do you want to make Mixed Heritage Day? And so we had it for August 27th. It was a day of celebration. The mayor of Los Angeles recognized me and my team for the work that we did, and my nonprofit organization, Multiracial Americans, and another organization that I co-founded, which is Multicultural Corner. So we were on the field at Dodger Stadium being recognized by Mayor Garcetti for the work that we do in the multiracial community.
Great.
But all of that to say, I went back to my kids' seat and they flashed on the Jumbotron, "Welcome Mixed Heritage Day." And if you could just, I just can't explain the feeling of doing something like that for my children that gave them such a sense of pride, and to let folks know at Dodger Stadium and, you know, everywhere else that we're here. And I think that's what's key, is to let folks know that there is another group. You know, it's not just white, black, Asian. There's a actual group called multiracial that are saying, you know, shouting out, "We are here." And so that was important. So we hope to bring that to other venues as well. So it was a great day and something that we hope to continue.
Sonia, where can we find you online?
Yes, thanks. You can find me at www.mixedupclothing.com. And there you could find, you know, how to reach out. My blog is there as well, at the Mixed Up blog. Find me there. I'd love any questions that your listeners have. Feel free to email me. I'm Sonia at mixedupclothing.com. And all my social media handles are at Mixed Up Clothing.
We'll put all those in the show notes as well. Well, you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again for chatting with us today. I loved it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
a lot. Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening today. If you are multicultural or multiracial, I just want to say thank you for hanging in with this episode. I know you've probably faced a lot of these questions all your life, and you may feel a little frustrated that some of us are just now starting to understand all of the implications of questions like this. So thank you for that, for just giving us the space and an opportunity to ask the questions. I do want to point you to another podcast called The Mixed Experience by Heidi Daru. She shares about politics, culture, and the arts, and she interviews mixed race writers, filmmakers, and more. Her episodes include some really interesting perspectives from people from many different backgrounds, even internationally. And the other podcast to listen to, if you haven't yet, is The Mashup Americans. It's a ton of fun. And just a quick warning, sometimes the language can be a little bit salty, so keep that in mind if you have kids around. But it also shares stories from mashups from all different cultural backgrounds within the U.S., and it's great to listen to. If you would like to support The Global Mom Show and keep these conversations coming, head over to theglobalmom.com/support. On that page, you'll find a list of places that you can shop where a small amount of your purchase will go towards supporting The Global Mom Show, but it won't cost you anything extra. You can also find the link for our Patreon page and our PayPal link so you can donate directly there if you'd like. One of the easiest ways to support the show is by regular shopping on Amazon. All you have to do is go to theglobalmom.com/Amazon and you'll be directed straight to the Amazon site. Anything you purchase through Amazon will send a small commission to The Global Mom Show so that we can keep the internet going, the microphone working, and the recording studio, which is really just my basement, in session. If you'd like to send me some feedback about this or other shows or possible guests or future ideas for shows, I would love to hear it. My email address is marygrace@theglobalmom.com, and I will answer you directly, or you can tweet me at The Global Mom. You can find me on Instagram at The Global Mom Show, and you can also find me on Facebook at The Global Mom Show. Thanks so much. Have a great week. And remember, you can live a global life wherever you are and teach your kids to do the same.